What's going on, guys? And welcome back to another episode of Stereotherapy. I'm your host, Lisa. Of course, we got Justine here. And if you're new here and just joining us for the very first time, this is the show that showcases the importance of music and mental health. We invite guests on to share their own story of how music has made an impact in their life and to share their own mental health journey. As always, like we have said, each conversation we have truly is that step in ending the stigma of mental health. Each conversation, each person we meet, and each listener, you guys listening, that helps end that stigma and let others know that they're not alone. And that intersection of music and mental health, it's so important. So thanks for checking us out if you are new here. And again, thank you to everybody that's been listening all the time. We really appreciate you. Another thing, we always got to say is if you really are enjoying this show and you want to help support our show, all you got to do is leave a positive rating or review on any app you are listening to this right now. It means a lot to us. We appreciate you. And if you are a Google Podcast listener, let me know where you want this thing because I know it's going away this month, I think. So let me know. It says YouTube Music. I don't know anyone that uses that. So let me know and I'll get this because if that goes away, we go away. So hit me up. Let me know. All the links down below to get in contact with us. Today on the show, I was joined by Sara Syms, and I was really excited to talk to her. If you're not sure who she is, she's a singer-songwriter out of Nashville and a mental health advocate that I was so privileged to have the opportunity to talk to on the show. And I think if I could put a picture, all our guests, but after speaking with her, if I could put a picture of what is this podcast? Absolutely, she would be up there with so many guests, and we appreciate every guest. And Sara, we talk a lot about her own journey and her mental health and her story. And this was one episode early on when we started recording. I knew to just kind of take a backseat, let her share her story because that's what's so important. And her story was going to reach so many people and make such an impact. So you're definitely going to hear that a little bit in this. And I'm really proud of that as a podcaster. And I hate calling myself a podcaster. I know Justine too. But it was just one of those moments that you had where you have a list of questions and you want to ask this and that, but it just flowed so well to where she was sharing so many amazing things. I didn't want to interject. And I think came across with a wonderful, just authentic conversation about mental health. And we touch on her time in residential treatment, the steps it took to get there, the steps after, because mental health is an ongoing thing. There's no one size fits all. And I love that we touched on that. She touched how she deals with it now and new things she's learning about herself, the community she's created. We touched on her music these days is a single she just dropped off of an upcoming mental health record that drops in May, and I cannot wait for that. Love these days. I think so many of us can relate to that. Really want you to check it out. There's a link below. Go check it out, guys. I was sent this early on before we recorded this, and I was so privileged to do that and listen to this and just absorb it. Love what she's doing. We also touched on when we lose a musician such as Chris Cornell that struggled with the same things that we did and do and continue to, how that affects you as a music fan when you lose someone like that, which I think is a conversation we haven't had too much yet. So it was really exciting to do that. And again, I'm really excited to share this conversation. Just a little disclaimer, Justine is not in this one. She could not join us for this episode. She wanted me to go ahead, though, because I already had to cancel on Sara once with losing my voice. Didn't want to cancel again. So we got it done. And thank you, Justine, for letting me do this. Are you guys ready to meet Sara? Because I'm ready for you to meet Sara. All right. Like you clicked on this, you want to meet her. I'm just going to be quiet, but I wanted to get that all out of the way because this is such a great conversation. Here's my conversation with Sara Syms. And trying to figure out, who you are, what you're about. I learned your hometown is actually Chicago. So amazing because I'm from the southwest suburbs like Naperville, Aurora, and I always would say I was from Chicago. But
I'm actually not from Chicago. I'm from Wheaton, so
oh my
we're
gosh,
neighbors.
oh my gosh, so that's so cool. Like when did you relocate from there?
Let's see. So I was born in Chicago, then we moved to Boston. So I have a tie to the East Coast too. So we moved to Boston when I was like, I don't know, 3. And we were there for like the sizable part of my childhood. And then we moved back to Chicago when I was 10. And so I lived in Wheaton through high school. And then I went to college at Miami of Ohio. So I moved away in like 96. So I've been gone from Chicago for a while, but my dad and I have family that like my family, a lot of my like aunt and uncle and cousins, they all lived in neighboring, like they lived in Lombard.
Mhm.
So, and since then they've kind of moved out a bit, but I haven't been back in a while.
No,
So
me either. I haven't gotten the chance to get out there again. It's been a while because then, with COVID happening and then after that and just life, I couldn't get out there. So it's definitely something I gotta get back out there. It's so awesome and that's so crazy. What a small world that like Wheaton, I've been to Wheaton so many times because that is so close to where I
I
used
know,
to
and
live.
Naperville's way cooler than Wheaton, though. Let's
Oh my
let's be
God.
real
Oh,
here.
for sure. I hope it still is. Like I said, I haven't been back, but
I'm
my friends
sure. I'm
still.
sure it is.
Yeah, and it's I mean, and now you're in Nashville. So and I think over the years, that's been, like, the hotspot for music, and I think so many people we used to think it was New York or just LA, that's where you had to go. I mean, at least to me, I thought that. For you, what is so special about Nashville? What does that do for you as a musician, being in that kind of scene?
Yeah, I think. I think what Nashville did for me, and it didn't when I moved. It actually didn't need to be Nashville, but what it did was unlock this notion that there is life beyond New York.
Mhm,
So I moved to New York when I was 21, like right after graduation. And, I think New York is a very specific type of person that can live there. It's a very hard city. But if you are that person, it kind of locks
mhm,
you in. I always would call it like kind of a bad boyfriend. Like you love,
mhm,
and it's like this love-hate relationship that I had with it. And I moved there thinking I'd be there for like a
mhm,
year or two, and I was there for almost 15 years.
mhm,
And so over the course of those 15 years, like I almost moved to LA a bunch of times. I had been playing, like going back and forth to Nashville, recording with other people. And so I almost moved to Nashville like two or three times. And I always wanted, the potential of moving somewhere else, but like New York kind of kept a hold on me. And so when I finally did move to Nashville, which was the summer of 2014, like I said, it didn't need to be Nashville, but I needed to get out of New York to just know that things live beyond our comfort zone, right?
mhm,
Like, and so the first couple months in Nashville it was a massive, just culture shock.
mhm,
Being a nice girl from the Midwest, like when you live in New York for 15 years, I mean, you don't harden, but you definitely become a little bit different. And, so I think, and then I loved it. And I would say that half of New York and Brooklyn moved to Nashville around the same time as I did. Like
mhm.
there was a Facebook community that was called like New Yorkers to or sorry, yeah, New Yorkers to Nashville. And it was in the like folk and Americana scene. And I think that people from the coast were starting to realize that it's super expensive. They don't really necessarily have a car. And when you're touring a lot, you really can't do much more than just that little upper area. Whereas in Nashville, I think a lot of people moved here, not necessarily to make it in Nashville or play in Nashville all the time, but it's such a great hub to get to other places. Chicago, Atlanta's only four
Mhm.
hours away. You have Birmingham, you have, you go any direction, and it's kind of this like central hub. So yeah, I really, I've been here in Nashville and kind of like split in two times. So I moved here in 2014. I was here for 4 years. I met my now partner, who has two daughters. So that's another interesting thing of my story is I became a pseudo mom to two teenagers
Mhm.
overnight. And so we ended up moving to Cincinnati where they were living with their mom, be more like in their day-to-day lives. And so we were there throughout COVID for 3 years. And then we ended up moving back to Nashville. So
Oh, yeah, no, I agree with you with the kind of hardening because when I moved here, New Jersey, I mean, it's so close to New York and they still have that edge to you. And living here, I definitely, again, being that Midwest girl in here and everyone's go, go, go. They're so fast. And if you go to like the deli or anywhere, you better know what you want because it's
gotta
it's
know.
like hurry up. Like we don't care that you just moved here. We don't and even that or even getting into the music scene over here to wanna do this, it was, "Well, we already have these 10 people that have lived here. They're the locals. They know this. You're an outsider." So I
Right.
cannot imagine even like, I think New Jersey was tough. I cannot imagine New York and doing that because yeah, and I mean, like you said, and becoming, that pseudo mom to 2 teenage girls, how did you deal with that? Like, what did you do to sort of I don't know how you can prepare for that, but
You can't. I
yeah.
mean, uh, I think that I'm so blessed to be in their lives, and it was definitely a point when Mark, my partner, asked me, if I would want to move in this situation, how they really needed us. It was kind of this leap of faith for someone that I loved because I had no intentions of leaving Nashville. I loved it. I had been established for 4 years. Everything was going really well with my music. And here is this man that I love, and he has two daughters. And if I am to continue to be with this in this relationship, they're not going anywhere. So it was kind of like this, yes, I don't necessarily want to pick up and move, but it is really important to me to be a part of their lives because these are his daughters. So I think that and I've always loved kids, and
Mhm.
I don't have kids of my own, and that's never been important to me. Like I very much I feel like if I had a million other careers, like one, I would be a therapist,
Mhm.
and two, it would be with kids because I just, I think there's a lot of people out there that are like, kids, whatever. But
Yeah.
like I can't even express in words how magical children are.
Oh,
And so I think the notion of, getting to these girls at that age, it was kind of tricky. It was complicated because I'm sure by no means they wanted me in their life, right?
yeah.
And I very much wanted to be in their lives, but there was a lot that kind of weighed on my psyche. And I was going through a lot of mental health stuff anyway. I'm moving to a new city. I
Yes.
didn't have the community that I had built up here. My partner was traveling a lot because part of us moving there was his job that was based in Nashville. He had to go back every other week. And so we both worked in advertising. And so like he would travel a lot anyway. And so that travel to other places was there. And then he had to slot in the every other week to Nashville. So, very quickly I just had to, just there's kind of two parts of your psyche that's going on. There's the I need to work on myself and my own mental health and dealing with that. And I also need to make sure that I'm being there as a pseudo mom figure to whatever it is that they need. And those are two very different things. And it's something that I still, work on and struggle with. I think there is something to be said about stepping into a family that is already established as a bonus mom, as a bonus dad, and I think it's, a lot of there's not a lot of credit that goes there. And so it's really trying to figure out like how do I fit into this family and into this dynamic. And it took a while and I just every week, every year, I just had to keep reminding myself and having lots of talks with my partner of like, I feel like I'm screwing this up. I feel like they don't appreciate me. I feel like they don't respect me. I feel like, they think that this or that or whatever it is. And he's like, honestly, the only thing that they need to see is us being in a loving relationship and you being open and honest with them. And that is what I, continue to do. And, I formed a really beautiful relationship with both of them. The youngest just turned 21. She is going to school out in St. Louis. And then the oldest one actually lives with us right now. Like she just graduated from college. Her and I share a lot in common. We're very close. She is also she's a performance singer songwriter, and she is working on her very first EP. And so, I get to help her in that way. And I don't know, it's been really, it's like you said, there are no words to describe it. And it went through the entire spectrum of emotions.
100%. Like, I had, I guess, call him my bonus dad, Greg. He was so important to me, and, sadly, we lost him a couple years ago, and gosh, over a decade ago, but, that relationship, I was 19 when he had entered my life, and again, there was that hard dynamic of how did he fit in, but our relationship was so special, and I credit anyone like yourself and like him or anyone else out there. It takes such a special person to build that and with teenage children especially, but I can tell just from the way you talk about them, you're gonna be such a great influence and a part of them. You already are, but that's hats off to you because I appreciate anyone, and I'm with you. I love kids. My whole job, I used to be a nanny, childcare provider. I don't have any kids of my own yet. I'm hoping one day, but I literally just adore them, and there's something so magical about, like, living life through the eyes of a kid, and there's nothing like it.
Completely.
And
They haven't been all effed up yet.
well,
So
exactly, there's
they're
that
just
innocence.
pure and they just say what they
Mhm,
wanna say, and everything is possible to them.
mhm,
And, I think that there's so much work too, like when you're working on your own self or with other people or as a mental health advocate or whatever. I mean, there's so
mhm,
much work doing around your inner child that like you get to bring all that back. Like we get to uncondition all the BS that
mhm,
has been programmed on us and play, right? Like,
mhm,
so as a musician, as an artist, as anything, that is a creative endeavor, I think we get so locked up in being so serious and like checking all the boxes, whereas at the end of the day, like it really is play.
mhm,
And I don't know if you know, I'm blanking on the author right now. I have it here. The book, The Artist's Way. It's by Julia Cameron, and it's
no.
a book that I think every single human should read because like she basically has made this her life mission and she sold millions and millions, maybe billions of copies. And it's in like every single language, but it's called The Artist's Way. And it's really this notion that like art and creativity is not just for those that have talent or are musicians, whatever. Like everybody can be creative. And whether it's just a hobby for you or your actual career, there's so much in, unlocking all of the barriers that we've put up that like we're not worth writing a poem. We're not worth, like having anything to say. I work in advertising and I think it's, I'm a creative director. Like I studied graphic design, and so, like, yes, by nature, I am a creative role, but even in meetings in advertising, you have other people that are like, well, I'm not creative or I'm not on the creative team. And it's like, no, like we as humans couldn't be more creative at all. So it's
Mhm,
this notion of like unlocking your inner artist. And that absolutely like first and foremost starts with play because kids know how to create something from nothing. And, it's really hard as adults to create something from nothing because we have like 20,000 rules that stand in the way before we can even get to something. So even like in the case of songwriting, like if I'm just free writing, which I love to do, sometimes I love it way more than even writing songs, but I'm open and there's no inhibition. When I sit down to write a song, there's all of this crap that
mhm,
comes in that's like, oh, you got to make sure that you're writing for this particular audience, or you got to make sure that, the
mhm.
chorus has a good hook. It's like if we didn't have all that stuff, then I feel like you would be so free.
I can imagine at that because you're right, especially in this era of TikTok and social media now that that's what it's about and creating a 30-second content clip of that, and I can't imagine being an artist. It's hard enough on my end where it's like, "Oh, where do I clip this to maybe pull someone into a conversation that I really want them to hear?" And it just is I think you can't lose that creative edge. You can't lose that where you're just doing it for yourself. You have to remember why you're doing it, and I
Yes.
think it's easier for me to say I'm not a musician, but in kind of speaking of you as a musician, what are some of those first memories of falling in love with music? I would love to know as someone that is a musician that enjoys their songwriting, whether it's one or a couple, what are those memories for you?
Yeah, so I've played music my entire life. My mom, who was my best friend and my cheerleader, who passed away when I was in college. I was 19 when she passed away.
Mhm,
Um, she was a folk singer and she was very much into music and she got me into music very early on. And my parents supported it, but I played piano and violin when I was like 5.
mhm,
That's when I started. And I don't know, music is just, I feel like I always joke that I like came out of the womb singing, but music is something that just like makes sense to me, right? It's
mhm,
like when the world is just going to whatever, music is, it's the universal language. Like everyone can understand or sit and relate to something through music. So, and then I had this amazing opportunity when I was back in Chicago, in Wheaton, part of a world-renowned children's choir that like traveled around the world, and like we would like do concerts with the Vienna Boys Choir. Like it was like really amazing
Mhm.
opportunities. It was called the Glen Ellen Children's Chorus. And I think that's where I really like the bug of performing and how special music is. I was traveling around Europe at 10 years old with this choir,
Wow.
for months at a time, and just I think that's really where I cut my teeth in the singing, and the idea that like music is innately sacred and storytelling for me. And so yeah, I kind of did the piano, violin, singing thing throughout high school. In college, I was a piano performance major, so I'm classically trained in piano. Um, it's funny. I hated practicing. I feel like a lot of people like don't like to practice. I taught piano to like 10 to 12 kids when I was in high school, and, I loved it, but I also just like, I wanted just a normal job. Like my mom would laugh at me all the time. She's like, you want a job at the mall where you make like $5, where you're teaching kids piano and you're making like 25 or $30 an hour. And I'm like, I don't like, I want to be normal.
Mhm.
But, I'm so blessed for that because, I think that when I didn't really want to necessarily do something, I wasn't like, I didn't need to do it, but my parents just pushed me, and I'm glad that they pushed me because now I feel like, I can't imagine what life would be like if I didn't play piano. Like, when I'm having a really hard day, or I really feel like even music can like pull me out of like a panic attack. If I
Mhm.
just sit down at the piano, or I grab my guitar, or I just start humming or just start singing, I mean, it's like an instant shift. And so I think for a very long time, music is something that I always wanted to do, always full time. And I've always been scared to do that. And I've always kind of kept this advertising security job, security, financial security
Mhm.
blanket, that yes, I do love creating and I do love being a creative director, but it's not why I was put on this earth. And so, this past year, I actually got laid off, end of 2023. And this was like the crossroad that I'm like, you know what? The universe literally kicked me out of the nest. They're like, you need to stop digging around and
Mhm.
really like, this is it. This is your crossroad. Take it or leave it. And
Yeah.
so that's what I'm doing. I am literally putting everything I have into my music and into my mental health advocacy. Um, and in the meantime, I'm just trying to freelance and, make the financial ends meet while I'm building this, let's say, incubator. But I am fully, fully committed to, I want people to hear my music. I want people to hear my story. I have been through so much trauma and healing, and years and years and years of therapy. I spent, the summer of 2021 in residential treatment. That's a big part of my story. But from that, I think I was like, my music and this type of songs that I write have always been introspective, always been, melancholic, a way to kind of help me move through things in life. And that's never changed. And there's kind of this new light to what I can use my music platform for. And that really is like wholeheartedly to be an advocate for mental health and to try and bring awareness and destigmatize it, and, help create change as much as I can.
That's why you were someone, so when you had reached out and I had looked at your TikTok and looked to try and see, and I was like, this is like, if I could take a picture and say, "This is our podcast, everybody," somebody that's an advocate for mental health and using their platform, it would be you, it'd be Sarah. So, I was so excited to have you on and talking about your residential treatment. When reading a little bit about your story of what I could find, I think one of the things I saw you had said where it was you have to have the courage to ask for help. And it's really, and you advocate for that. And it's okay to ask for help because I think that's a big stigma in itself, right? That And even me, I struggled with it for a long time in dealing with anxiety where, "Oh, I'm fine. It's just everybody is this way. That's okay. I'm just, being called a worrier. It's okay. I worry about this." But I guess what would in as far your journey, if someone is there and has tried so many things in their mental health journey and maybe they're on the fence about residential treatment, how did that play a positive role in your journey? And maybe someone that's not sure of what to do or those steps, what do you kind of say to that person out there?
Absolutely. So I feel like it's funny because in years of therapy, my go-to statement was always just like, if I was very anxious or, like I was diagnosed with clinical depression, anxiety, CPTSD, like from maybe my early 20s.
Mhm.
And when I would get to a place where I just was so overwhelmed, my statement would be over and over, I just need to go into a room, or I need someone to lock me into a room. And it's almost like I was painting this picture of like, I need someone to lock me up in a mental institution because I'm not safe and I don't feel safe. And I need someone to help me and protect me. And, as I had this one therapist when I first moved to Nashville kind of challenge me on that. She's like, "Okay, like what does that look like to you?" And I guess, when I started that to me was just like a thing in my head. But I was like, "You know what? What does that look like?" And I the time leading into me checking into residential treatment, there was a lot going on. It was COVID. I had just spent the past year writing my album, The Darkest Light, which I decided I was like, for years, I've done a lot of healing work. I've done a lot of therapy. I've gotten into breath work. I've gotten into all of this stuff, but there's still this like 30% that I just tuck away and don't deal with. And so the darkest light was really going to be about my promise to myself of I'm going to look at that 30%. I'm going to look at everything. I'm going to go to the dark night of my soul. I'm going to go to the shadow side and I'm going to uncover everything and I'm going to create this beautiful album. And the themes are going to be around this notion of the dichotomies of life and how we can't live one without the other. So like you cannot have light without the darkness.
Mhm.
You also cannot, stay in the darkness. The light will find you. So it's like this balance between like hot and cold, yin and yang. And while I was writing that, COVID happened and like it was very amazing and terrifying to me that like everything that I was writing about just about myself was happening at a humanity level scale. So whether it was like catastrophic unknowns or the political polarization that we were experiencing, I mean, every
Yeah.
day we were waking up, it's like, oh my God, like what's going to happen? And so I think while all that was happening, I also decided that was a really good time to try and get off of antidepressants after being on them for 17 years.
Ooh, yeah.
Really, in hindsight, not the best timing, but I was
Yeah.
like, you know what? I'm home. I'm with family. This is good. So that was like a big struggle. And as it just kept snowballing and snowballing, I mean, it got to the point where there really was there was nothing else. There was either I was going to leave this planet or I was going to check in. And I worked with my therapist. One thing that was really important to me was finding a program that didn't feel clinical, that didn't feel like I was just, another sick patient that was going into the system. I wanted to find like a trauma healing center that felt holistic, and there were two places that she had other clients go to. One was in New Mexico. I don't remember the name of it.
Mhm.
And the place that I ended up at was in Nashville, and it's called Integrative Life Center. And it is a trauma, heart based, like heart led treatment center filled with, everything from yes, group therapy, individual therapy, different things that they do, whether it's EMDR, brain spotting, equine therapy, art therapy, movement therapy, breath work, sweat lodges. I mean, it was like so well rounded, and I was terrified. I mean, I literally showed up on the doorstep of this treatment center. My partner dropped me off, and I was just vibrating. Like like all my levels were off. I mean, I was probably, I had lost 10 pounds in a week. Like I was so scared. I was so shaken. And I was really, really, the biggest thing I was scared of is like, I was already so broken, and I don't know how I could possibly be any more broken. And I was afraid that if I went there and opened everything up, that like the time would run out and they would like send me out to the real world and I
Yeah.
would be even more fragile. And like it could not have been the more opposite than that. I residential treatment and then moving from that to PHP to IOP, like the step down that they normally do, it was the hardest experience of my life, and it was the most amazing, rewarding experience of my life. Period. End of sentence. So I would say that anyone that is really, really struggling, and there were people that, when you go from residential, they, depending on how you're doing, they recommend a step down because it's really hard when you, for a month, are in this bubble, right? Where all you're doing is you're with your community, you're exposing yourself, you're being vulnerable, you're breaking down left and right. It's impossible to just go back into the real world.
Yeah.
So they recommend that then you move to PHP, which if you live locally, you can just go, Monday through Friday. It's during the week. If you don't live locally, I lived in the PHP house, which was on Music Row. And then from there, you can do IOP. So it's basically you're like stepping in. It's almost like if you had a substance abuse problem, you move into a halfway house. And there were people when I was at PHP that would come into the day program, and it was clear that they needed a lot more support. And so it's not unlikely that like they would be given the opportunity to maybe get a little extra level of care and go into residential, which a lot of them did. And I would say that anyone that is thinking about, not knowing where to turn, needing that help, like asking for help is so, so freaking brave. And I talk about this all the time in my TikToks and on my different platforms, but it's like to struggle with mental health and to wake up every day and to push for the next 5 minutes and the next 5 minutes, that is not weak. Like that is the opposite of weak. That is the stuff of warriors. Humans can spend their whole life shoving shit under rugs,
Mhm.
and like that's not dealing with anything. I think it takes a lot of courage to face the darkness, to face the demons, to ask for help. And once you ask for help, like it will find you. The people that you need, they will show up. If it's a thing of financial worries or money, like there are places out there that you can help, get funding, financing, whatever it is. I just think that like life is so precious. And I wish as humanity that we looked at mental health the way that we look at physical health, because
Oh,
it is
yes.
the same thing. It is the same thing. Like mental health affects your physical health so much that like most disease and everything that's happening, it's all from a mental level. And we're energy, we are pure energy. And when things aren't right and they manifest in a physical way, I would argue that mental and physical health like shouldn't be separated at all, period.
Mhm.
Because those are just symptoms that are happening on the outside, but like needing to correct, what's happening on the inside. So that was a long way around of saying,
No.
I think you should absolutely, and if anyone wants to like direct message me or whatever, like I want to spend my life going around and talking with people and, sharing my stories and sharing my vulnerabilities. I constantly get from my community and people that, either on Instagram or TikTok, like how people are so impressed at how much I share and how
Mhm.
raw and vulnerable I am. And the reason I do that is because I've done the work and gotten to the other side where I'm able to share that. And, I feel like a lot of times when I've looked for guidance and I find other mental health people, a lot of times it feels like they're talking down to you, or they've figured it out and
Mhm.
they're up here and you're down here. And if you listen to them, then you'll be able to come up here.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't see it at all like that. I feel like what I want to admit to people is that we're in this together, we're healing together. And while I've done a lot of work, I struggle every day.
Yeah.
Like I work on myself. I am constantly, working. Mental health just doesn't, you don't get like a certificate
No.
and you're good to go.
No, it's I everything you just said, I'm like, "Oh gosh, how am I gonna fit this into so many clips?" Because I think it's so important to what you're saying and how brave it is to take those steps and ask for help. And I think something that I've struggled with when I was open, maybe you come across somebody then maybe either they're not one in tune with mental health, or they've never experienced it themselves or around them. And if you get that one person that's just kind of like, oh, okay, well, stop worrying about it. And you can kind of, as someone who's struggling, step back and be like, "Okay, well, maybe it's not worth it." And that's something I had to work on, that, you know what, maybe that person just didn't hear me, or whatever it is, that there is someone out there that will hear you, and what you're doing and creating your community is so important, because you're right. Or whether it's on any social media, someone's like, "Oh, take this. If you take this, these little supplements, you're gonna be good." And maybe for them, but not for everybody, and it's not a one size fits all thing, and it's ongoing, like you said. I mean, my fiancé was in a really bad accident, work related. He was a lineman apprentice, and really bad accident took place where, he ended up losing fingers, toes, extensive time in the burn ICU in Philadelphia, and he hadn't experienced any mental health. Really, I mean, that we know of, right? Maybe it was suppressed or anything, but since that accident and that trauma, he's gone through extensive therapy and therapists that maybe weren't the right fit, that kind of brushed him off. It took a couple, but we finally have a really great therapist. But he's kind of in his own journey of learning that. And as a man, too, there's a huge stigma in itself
Absolutely.
there, and what he's dealing with. And as someone who struggles themselves and having to help him, it's like you said about tucking away. I tucked all my stuff away that I shouldn't have, because I'm like, "Oh, well, he needs it, so I can
Yeah.
tuck everything away and I'll be fine." No, I was at the lowest part, especially during COVID, because you're inside, you're away from everything. And I think that's just everything you just said is just so important for anyone to hear. And I'm gonna link your TikTok and everything under the description and everything for this, because even me scrolling, I needed to hear that. I forget what you said the other day or something. I needed to hear this. So I know you're doing it. I don't wanna say, like, it was, mm, I guess, the positive of, in a way, of going through all that you have. You're now able to help so many people in the process, and use your voice and your platform for that greater good.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I also, I'm working on kind of, my I hate that word brand, but like what I stand for. Let's
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah.
I'm really trying to hone in on what value am I bringing to people. And to me, I think that I work in advertising and marketing, and at the end of the day, I'm also a songwriter, and I need to make money and sell things, and
Mhm.
but in an authentic way. But I'm working with some coaches and stuff in talking about, how do you build community around you? And, it's this notion of like not talking down to them, but giving people like a soft place to land. And, it's something I've also learned in therapy, something that was really drilled into us those couple months that I was there, is like when you're talking with someone, to always frame it that like, I may be making this up, or I I feel this, so it's basically not pointing blame at someone and saying, you did this, you did that, or, so it's really just like words matter. And
Mhm.
so to me, it's like, okay, if I want to build community around and I want people to hear my stories and know what I went through, I need them to understand that I am equal to them, right? That we're healing together, we're in this sandbox together. I'm not preaching to you.
Mhm.
And second of all, that I'm probably talking to myself 10 years ago.
Mm.
Right. And so as I go through and flip through and look at the progress that I've made, I mean, when I landed in Nashville, I look at, journals. I hated myself. Like, I mean, it's hard to read because, like, you see the progress. And, that's another thing that's like really important as we're going through our healing journeys, is to take a step back, or like take, take a bird's eye view and look at the how much you've accomplished, right? Because I feel like it's really hard to see progress when you look at day to day to day to day. Like we're like in blinders, but like as you take a step back and look at 5 years of progress or 10 years of progress, I mean, my journal entries were just like, whip, 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 like,
Mhm.
this sucks, I suck, this, blah, blah, blah. It just was like over. I mean, I literally hated myself. There was so much self-loathing. There was so much self-criticism. Nothing that I mean, everything, as soon as I would accomplish anything, it was negated and I would move on to the next thing. And so, how I make my content, like I try and pull back some of those sentiments of where I was. Like, where was I when I lost my mom? How did I feel? Like, where was I when you know, like when I first started in therapy, my therapist called me like jazz hands because I would show up like it was like like a dinner and evening show. I was like, ta-da,
Yeah.
ta-da, like, and she's like, you stop. Like,
Yeah.
like, not you're embarrassing yourself, but like I was going above and beyond trying to just, peacock and make sure that she knew that I was okay. And
Mhm.
like, it was just, I was in so much denial. And so, I really try and make a mix of stuff, and it's all from my life. Like everything that I talk about, I've experienced. And, I try and, read journal entries or talk about, what I learned in this instance. I think that coming out of treatment, there's definitely pillars or high level themes that you learn. And two of mine that I think are so big that follow me around every day is number one, like that I'm a double water sign. I am a Cancer moon, Cancer sun. Like I am very emotionally charged. And I am very empathic. I'm highly emotional, and I ran from my emotions for years. And when you have that much emotion, and you're just stuffing it and stuffing it and stuffing it. I mean, I learned in treatment that your emotions last in your body for a maximum of like 45 seconds. Like,
Wow. Yeah.
that's it. You can just
Yeah.
feel it, and it may suck, but like if you feel it and it moves on, like energy in motion, that is all that emotions are. But if you stuff it, like you're basically just building massive amounts of scar tissue, and it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So the one thing I learned is that like you cannot run from your emotions if you want to be a productive human being. And then the second thing is that I feel like since the death of my mom, or since other traumas that I experienced, like when I was younger, that just, I'm constantly waiting for someone to come save me. And
Mhm.
whether that's a partner, whether that's, my mom coming back from the dead, after she passed away, I was constantly clinging to like very strong female figures. And it became obvious to me what I was doing. I was trying to recreate something that I had that was missing with my mom. But like, no one is coming to save you. Like, I don't care how special the people are in your life. Like,
Mhm.
the only person that can save you is you. The only person that can make you stop drinking is you. The only person that can make you stop smoking is you. The only person that decides whether you're going to stay here and fight or let go is you. And I think that that was a huge one for me. And so every time I'm really struggling and I feel like I'm looking outside of myself for something, like external validation is really my special currency. Like I crave it. I want it. I need it. And so I'm really learning how to like give that to myself. And it's hard when I haven't done that for 40 years.
Yeah,
So,
no. I mean, I totally agree about saying you're fine when you're not. I mean, that was my number one thing. That's still I'm working through that, but especially when my fiancé had his accident and I had to throw my mental health, I was just like, "Okay," like I said, I tossed it to the side, which was probably the worst thing I could have done because then we're both but anyone would ask me, "How are things?" "I'm fine." "How's everything?" "I'm fine. I'm good. I'm good." When in
good,
reality,
good.
no, no, I was not. There was nothing, and it's hard too on the other end of those people asking because 'cause they're like, "Well, she's fine." But I think that's why I always advocate to, like, check on everybody, even if they are saying that, if you notice little things because we had a guest on was it, no, 2 weeks ago, and he had said people around him noticed things way before he even did, that, hey, something wasn't quite right. And I think that's just so important. And I've learned from years of suppressing so many things, whether it was when I was younger, and my father just kind of just walked out of our lives. And that was something that I'm good as a teenager, but as a teen girl, you need your dad. You need that.
Absolutely.
And so by suppressing that for years, that led to a lot of things that weren't good. And even I know that was a trigger to my mental health and the start of that kind of like downfall of where I would always just tuck it in, which, like you said, you should no,
Yeah,
absolutely not. And I know it's easier for me to even say that and when I'm still learning that, but anyone else out there, like, it's as hard as it is to face it and whatever that is, whether it's therapy or even just talking about it openly like this, something. You gotta work through it because it's still years, like a decade after it happened, I still was
yeah.
not quite right, you know? And there's still, even to this day, there's that missing piece, and I think the more we don't tuck it in, the better off, no matter how hard it is to face those things, because it's not easy.
Totally, and always, like, better out than in. Like,
Mhm.
it's kind of a poison, right? So,
Yeah.
it can sit and fester inside of you, or you can let it out. And even if you let it out, like, without someone else, right? Like,
Mhm.
I was talking with my bonus daughter, Lex, and
Yeah.
we were working through something, and I was like, "You should write pros and cons, like, write it out." She's like, "Well, I have it in my head." I'm like, "It's not the same. It's really not the same." It's like when you are writing a journal entry, sometimes I'll look down, I'll be like, whoa. Like,
Mhm.
because it was in there, and your subconscious is coming out onto the piece of paper. And so I feel like even just saying it out loud, I mean, I have secrets like that I have held on to, like really toxic things that I
Mhm.
was just like, I'm a monster. And, I've shared it over the years with a few therapists, but even I mean, I remember like it was so hard. I was so embarrassed. We would work like 3 sessions at a time and I was like, you have to turn around. Like I was literally like a small little kid that's just like, I'm so embarrassed. I'm gonna like burst into flames if I tell you this. And I think that, that is the power that shame or a secret or the feeling of not of being not okay but not letting the world know, like it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so just anybody, and like anybody, there's so many numbers out there now that you can call. And um I'm even like I want to do everything, but I'm like I want to try and get certified, like get trauma certified. I would love to find a way that I could, volunteer or serve on the board of like, answering phone calls of people
Yeah.
that, are calling in that are like, ready to let go. And I feel like in when we're talking about, that thing that nobody wants to talk about. Like the second you mention suicide, people are like, no,
Yeah.
like, and I really had to get comfortable with the fact that like I talk about it a lot because I think that, suicide is something that is very misunderstood. It's literally like because I've experienced it multiple times. And the week leading up to me going into treatment, I woke up every hour at night and would just look at my partner and I would look at my dog and I would look around the room and I had a plan. And and I would beg myself, I'm like, one more hour. If you still feel this way, it was just like I had to tell myself over and over. And like all that it is what wanting to end the pain. I truly think that, and I can only speak for myself,
Mhm.
but I truly think that the majority of people don't want to die. Like, and I think that's the misconception is that people are like, they don't want to be here, they want to die. That's bullshit.
Mhm.
They don't want to be in pain. They're in so much pain that, like, I mean, when I tell you, I was crawling out of my skin, like I didn't know how to get to the next 5 minutes. And a lot of that was me being unmedicated and like, my just everything was just so off. And like, but I couldn't, my brain didn't know how to make it. Like it didn't, like time was really skewed. And I was just like, that was the only option. Like that was the only option. There's really
Mhm.
no options. And I remember being at treatment, it was only a weekend. and I tried, really hard to get off of antidepressants, and I ended up having to get back on them while I was there. And that was such a mind fuck that I
Mhm.
worked so hard for 6 months to do everything. Like I quit drinking, I quit smoking, I was doing breath work, I was doing yoga, I was doing all these things. And now I have to go back on something. And it was just such a mind fuck that like
Yeah.
that just that I needed to get back on that. But, I remember calling my therapist, and then begging that I could talk to my partner. So, because we're only allowed phone time X amount of time. And I'm like, I need to come home. And he's like, you are more than welcome to come home, but I feel like you should stay there because I think you need to work through this. And it dawned on me that coming home, like there was nowhere that I could run. Like I had ran out of places to run. Like I didn't know where to go. Home wasn't it, there wasn't it, in my body wasn't it. Like there were no more options for me. So I feel like that is, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And in the moment, like I feel like a lot of suicides, and we could look at stats and stuff, but like they are not that meticulously planned out. They are a knee-jerk
Mhm.
reaction to that, like
Mhm.
that moment. Like there's no reason why I should be here. I feel like I was lucky. I'm not stronger than other people. And I say that all the time. It's like I'm not a special case that like I had more, love for myself and so I made it. No, not at all. I literally made it because I'm lucky. I literally like everything aligned for me and I made it to treatment instead. But other people aren't lucky like that, And I think that we need to talk about it more. And I think that, we need to even like when I left work, like I left on short-term disability and then long-term disability. It's like they just tiptoed around the whole thing. Like nobody, and yes, I know part of it was like just for protection's sake and HIPAA and all that, but it's
Mhm.
like they lied the whole time when I was gone. And it was like this like, oh yeah, she'll be back. Like, why? Like,
Yeah.
and that just it sucked. I was like really upset because I'm like, when I got back, I made it a point and I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a talk about this and I'm going to like, if you're uncomfortable, let me make you comfortable. Like,
Mhm.
let me help you get comfortable because I'm not uncomfortable talking about this. And I know that it can be very uncomfortable for people that aren't ready, that are struggling. And I want to be someone that is able to help hold space. And there's not one thing that someone could say to be that would scare me or I also know my limitations. I'm not a therapist, right? So
Right.
like but I do have, a lot of really good insight and I have a lot of really amazing connections. And so I think it's just really really important to me that we just start talking about the stuff that we have in the dark and bring it into the light because otherwise, it's going to stay in the dark. And, we've got to kind of shine some light on those dark parts.
Absolutely, and I love that you were so open right now talking about suicide because that is we do hear that a lot where people will say, "Oh, well, they were weak or this and that." And I've lost a couple of people very close to me and it's I think so many people do want to shy away from talking about it. And I get it's uncomfortable and it's hard, but it's you never know what someone's going through, and actually, like, doing a little bit of digging on you, I learned that you loved Chris Cornell, Soundgarden, and I love him too, and he was someone that was also open about his struggles. Talk about mental health and losing someone too soon, as far as, and his friend Chester Bennington of Lincoln Park as well, but I don't know about you, but for me, when I lose an artist that I love, such as Chris Cornell, who I feel struggles with a lot of the same things as me, it's almost like losing like a friend and you feel like that weird connection because you're like, I felt similar things. And how did that loss sort of affect you? And I mean, we gotta also say you have a wonderful cover of Black Hole Sun that I listen to, and it is not easy to create or even come close to his vocals or do it justice, but you absolutely did. I love it, and I'm gonna link that as well. But how did that loss really affect you in a way with everything you were going through?
Yeah, I mean, I very much resonate with empathic artists that struggle and ones
Mhm,
that, really are. I mean, I feel like all artists, like they're very brave and they're putting, their heart and soul out there. But yeah, when Chris passed away and other artists, I'm also a huge fan of like Amy Winehouse, and
mhm.
it's just so sad that there's so much talent and so much pain, and you can hear the pain. You can hear the pain in these songs, and it's very cathartic. And I think that, to me, like, you'd think it would be the opposite, though, like listening to really painful music would make you more depressed, but it actually does the opposite for
Yeah.
me. It makes me feel like I understand what he's going through. He understands what I'm going through.
Mhm.
Um, and and by putting that out there, it's lighter.
Yeah.
So, I can't remember, I'm blanking right now on the song, like the song that he did like right before he died, that's just
Oh,
like, oh, I mean, I literally cannot listen to it without like choking up. It's on another level of pain. Figure it out.
yeah,
But
I know. I'm like, "Oh,
um
yeah, we'll find it."
Yeah. But to me, I feel like in my songwriting, there are songs that are very raw, and there are songs that, are lighter, but everything has a message. And I
Mhm,
think that the song that just came out last week that I put out, that's like the first single of a mental health themed album that I am putting out. It's going to be in two parts. It's going to be two EPs, like part one and part two. The first one's coming out in May for mental health month, and the second one will come out in like September, October. But the single that I wrote, These Days, is probably the most honest and raw version, and I feel like, it channels a little bit of that Black Hole Sun pain, because the whole sentiment of that song is just like, there is a silver lining to it, but it's just like, my heart is heavy these days. Like, there's
mhm,
nothing more to it. Like, and I'm alone, and I'm sad, and I'm scared. And I feel like, the bridge of the song, it is very, very visceral. It basically, the bridge, I think, sums up my feelings of suicide. And how, I had a massive substance abuse problem when I was younger. I pretty much spent the entire, like, a decade in New York numbing out, whether that was pills, alcohol, I mean, you name it, anything that I could get my hands on. I just wanted to just make it all go away. And so, I feel like this album and the music that I write going forward, I try and push myself, because, I also have a limit where I'm like, oh, I don't want to share that.
mhm,
But I feel like artists like Chris Cornell and like other artists that just are so, they're not bearing, like, they're bearing everything. They're leaving it all out on the line. And that is one thing that you can say, whether you like Soundgarden or not, or Chris Cornell or not, he was a fucking amazing artist.
mhm,
And to watch the music community like rally around him. I mean, part of, the type of music, like the soundscaping, that's, kind of my MO, is that raw, ethereal soundscaping thing, very moody, very kind of mysterious. But hearing Nora Jones' cover of that song after he passed away, I forgot where she did it, but it was just this stripped down piano version, and it like, it's
yeah.
it's
No, I
crazy.
know, yes, I know
It's
which one you're
crazy.
talking about, and it just it's like you put it so perfectly. I mean, those artists, and I'm the same way where I will gravitate towards those artists because we're like you said, maybe some people feel a way, "Oh, if I'm going through it, I can't sit here and listen to this." But it's that great connection that music is. It's that language like we were talking about that you just are connected and feel it. And talking about These Days, when you sent it to me, I mean, I wrote you back and I said, "I have goosebumps on this." Like was telling my fiancé about it. I'm like, "I literally am I gonna have her on this podcast?" She is like one of the most biggest voices I've had, and I feel like such a privilege to have you on. And it just I felt it, like you were talking about, like, we've all felt those times, and although you wrote it about a different situation, I'm connecting it to a different situation, and it's that language yet again, and I'm gonna link it because I've had it on repeat. I honestly love it, and I can't wait to hear more from this record that's gonna come out.
Thank you. I'm really excited about that we're finishing in the studio now, this first half.
Yeah.
But the next song that's going to come out is going to be the title track of
Mhm.
the whole album. Is called "I Love You, Keep Going," and that song was written actually in treatment together with some of my music community, and me really kind of wrapping it up and turning it into a piece. But it's just the notion that like it's okay to not be okay. That whole song is just like, you're at this place, you're being very brave, you're very open, and you don't have to be good. Like you really don't.
Mhm.
Like that's not the whole point of it is that you not being good, you've already made that step like huge leap forward. And admitting that you need help and that you need, someone to hear, someone to hold space, someone to listen to you. And so I'm really, really, really excited because I feel like all my music before has never really been under the label of mental health advocacy, but this album is literally a mental health album that I wrote while I was in treatment. And it deals with a bunch of different things. And I just cannot wait to let everyone know like the stories behind it and to hear their stories and to start a dialogue. So
Yeah, no, artists like you are so important, and I there was even a song that I caught on was, "Love Heals All." That was a song for me that I think as I don't wanna say cheesy as some people may say, "Oh, love can heal all," but love is so important and such an underrated thing when you're struggling, whether it's from your pet, your family, your friends, your whatever it is. How for you in your journey has do you feel that love really helped you carry through these hard moments?
yeah, so it was funny because we were trying to figure out what to name that song, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"That's so cliche," but it's literally it, and
Yeah.
so, that song I wrote, it's kind of an extension of The Darkest Light, and there's a song on The Darkest Light that's, like, the 2nd song called Fear and Love, and that one is, in my opinion, kind of the heartbeat and the mantra of the whole album, and it's the idea that, it's how we show up in this world. We can show up from a place of fear or we can show up from a place of love. And really on the other side of fear is love. And
Mhm.
love transcends everything. Like you can have evil people look at all of the hate crimes, everything that's going on. Like that's fear. There's
Mhm.
nothing more than that. I mean, I have a hard time saying that people are innately evil. I think there's just a lot of, people don't understand. They
Yeah.
refuse to, but there's just so much hate. And the way to contradict the hate is love. And in the darkest of places, like self love, love to others, showing up with more compassion, even in like an argument or something, like the way to transmute that or like make it go away is love. Like love fixes everything, it really does. And you can be sitting at home and feeling really sorry for yourself and this and that, and if you add a little bit of compassion and self-love, like you already will feel better. So to me, that song is really the answer to the darkness, like just a little bit of love and how we show up, what frequency we decide to use. I mean, you have all the negative, like lower frequencies, and love is like the top of the top of the top of the
Mhm.
top. And, it's just that's going to be on another album that's a little bit more my like electronic work and
Mhm.
stuff. But that, and there's another song that's going to be on that album called Golden that also came out. And Golden is really all about self-empowerment. And I wrote it about, being nerdy, but like I kind of wrote it about like your third chakra is all about your position in this world and self-empowerment. And in a world where everything is just going to shit left and
Mhm.
right, it's really hard to feel in control. But the things that we can control is our inner light and our self-empowerment. And so golden is just kind of like a, you know, let's lift it up, and let's kind of celebrate the fact that we can control a lot internally. And no matter what's going on outside of us, we can live in harmony, we can live in love, we can lift our frequencies, we can, just make um, our inner world a little less ugly than the outer world.
Oh, I this has just been such a great conversation, and I feel like I'm gonna have to just listen to this one, even though it is my podcast, but I'm gonna be listening to this one just to take in what you've said because you've said such wonderful things and you've been so open. And like I've said, I appreciate an artist like you using your platform and just letting others know because I think that's the hardest thing is that you're not alone and that somebody is there. And whether you know them personally or not, or you're finding the community online, it's so important. And I appreciate all the time you took today with us. And
Well, thank you.
I
I'm
just
so glad to be here.
oh, I'm just
So,
was looking forward to this one on the calendar. I was like, I look forward to them all, but I was like, this is gonna be so great. And I guess before I let you go and get back to your day, and we appreciate your time, where can people find you if they wanna find your music? I know obviously I'll link your TikTok, but,
yep.
anywhere they can find you so then they can listen to these days.
Yeah, so I am on every streaming platform out there. So wherever you
Mm.
like to listen to music, whether it's Amazon or Apple or Spotify, it's just Sara Syms, SARASYMS. You can find me at sarasyms.com. And the other thing that I just want to mention, because we live in such a streaming world, but I do have albums that are for sale. I also have merch. I have t-shirts, I have malas. And The Darkest Light is actually the first album that's on vinyl.
Oh,
And I recorded it out in New Orleans. It is so beautiful. It's in this beautiful church in the middle of Treme that like everyone from Dr. John to Bonnie Raitt, I mean, everyone
wow.
has played there. There's so much magic in those walls. And so, The Darkest Light is definitely a different experience when you're listening on vinyl. So you can buy records on Sara Syms. There's a store there. Yeah, and then as far as all the other handles, like you'll link them, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, like I very much have always been a singer songwriter and a musician, but I've gotten much clarity around the fact that like it is now mental health advocacy is equal to me as a songwriter. It's it is the reason why I write songs and is the reason why I want to share my songs with others. So
And I mean, I can speak for so many where I'm glad you've wrote these songs because I've just it was so much fun to look at back at your music and see how important an artist like you is. So
well, thank
again, you
you. Well, it
got
was really, really wonderful to be on here and so nice to get to know you and talk to
I
you more.
know. I
And let's
know.
definitely stay in touch.
Oh, I would love it. I would love it. And again, I can't wait to hear this record and appreciate your time. And I like you said, we will talk soon. I know. Maybe on that live.
Absolutely.
Maybe
And
I'll
I'd
catch
love
live.
to get back to New York and like play a gig
Yes.
sometime.
Oh,
So it's
oh,
been a while since I played out there, but that's definitely probably, in the cards in the
oh.
next 6 months or so.
Would love it, would love it. I'll take the trek out there. I'll be brave. That's another thing, but, like, I'll be
Maybe
brave
I'll
and
play
take
in
the
New
trek.
York and New Jersey.
Alright, guys, and that was my conversation with Sara Syms. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. Like I said, I just really gave Sarah the floor, and it really was such a great treat to have her say so many things that I was thinking, that so many are thinking, that battle mental illness, and I just think she was so important to have on, and this is one of my favorite ones I've ever gotten the chance to do, and I'm just, again, so privileged and so happy that she reached out to me on TikTok. See, there's good on TikTok, guys, there is. So, appreciate her. All her links are below. Check her out. Get ready because this mental health record is dropping in May. It's now March, so let's get on the train. Let's go support artists like Sarah that are doing so many incredible things in the terms of mental health awareness, and she's truly walking the walk of that. So, Sarah, if you are listening to this, love you, appreciate you, and continuing doing what you're doing because I know I'm not alone in saying we appreciate you. As for Justine and I, you guys are going to see us next Tuesday. You know the drill. New episodes every Tuesday. Justine will be right back with me. I'm really excited about that. Have her back. You won't have to deal with me on on my own. But appreciate you guys listening every week. And we will see you guys next Tuesday, bright and early. You know how it is, 6 a.m. These episodes go up. All right. Bye, guys.